only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning.
Welcome to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, where prepping doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Coming to you from a well-defended off-grid compound high in the mountains. Coming to you from his Florida room in Richmond, Virginia. Neither off-grid nor well-defended, unless you count as chickens and cats. Here is your host, Keith.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. My name is Keith, and this is episode 27. Today is December 13th, 2022. I have a new microphone and a sinus infection. So if I'm sounding really weird, half of the weirdness is the new microphone, and the other half of the weirdness is the sinus infection that'll probably turn into an upper respiratory infection, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I know several times I've mentioned the corn index. It's kind of a funny little indicator that I used several months ago when I started storing food on a larger scale. The price of a can of corn at my local Walmart was 48 cents. Over a period of time, it jumped to 60 cents. 20% increase. I'm happy to report that I can go back to my local Walmart and buy that exact same can of corn for 50 cents. So that price has dropped. Price of gas here in Central Virginia down to about $3 per gallon. Diesel is still like $4.50, $4.60. It has dropped. I believe it was $5 a gallon last time we spoke. So that is certainly good to see. However, it's basically, like I said a week or so ago, it's basically supply and demand. We're not producing any more oil for gasoline. We're not importing any additional oil to be made into gasoline. It's basically just a supply and demand type situation. The CPI, or the latest computer price index for November, was released several hours ago. A 7.1% increase. And now that's a bunch of things all globbed together. Like the price of vegetables here, at least, is up about 35 to 40%. I went to Kroger the other day and was absolutely knocked off my feet seeing the price of a green pepper lettuce, which wasn't that big of an increase, but cucumbers. Lord have mercy. What happened to the price of cucumbers? Now, look, I don't buy cucumbers every day, and maybe like every several weeks, maybe every other month, but I know darn well I did not pay that price 6 or 8 months ago. So veggies are up. So you throw that all together and you mix it all up and you have an increase of 7.1%. Now the increase in October was 7.7%. So inflation is still here. Inflation is going to get worse. The computer price index prices are still increasing, but they're increasing at a slower rate, which I guess is good, but they're still increasing. Now, Bloomberg, they predicted the CPI to be 7.3%. So they're taking a victory lap. These guys that apparently can predict the future, they're like, oh, well, it's not as bad because we said it was going to be 7.3 and it's only 7.1. See, we're really cool. Believe me, an increase of 7%, 7.1, 7.3 is still significant to the average person sitting at home living paycheck to paycheck. Quick side note, 75% of the folks here in the United States say that they live paycheck to paycheck. That is scary. Another statistic in this same little news blip that I read, there are quite a bit of people that make six figures that are living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't believe it at first, but then I started to think about it. You make six figures, you have a big house, you have a couple of really nice cars, your mortgage to the hilt, and your expenditures basically outpace what you bring in. Now, if those people making six figures just tighten their belt a little bit and don't have the fancy dancy cars, and the 16-bedroom McMansions and stuff like that, you would probably be surprised on how much more money they would have in the bank. But I digress. Talk a little bit about Twitter. So Twitter is an absolute dumpster fire right now. If you've been following that, Elon Musk has released four different, well, they're called the Twitter files. And I believe the fourth one was released yesterday. And it had to do with, I believe, the banning of President Trump at the time with some things that he said. These are a lot of internal memos. There's a lot of things that he's releasing. There's a lot of things that he is not going to release. But I think it gives everybody a good picture on what Twitter was doing. Some folks are going as far as saying that they're actually they actually interfered with the 2020 election. There's some evidence and some data that shows the White House was reaching out to the Twitter folks directly, requesting certain posts be taken down, so Twitter could kind of mold the narrative that they were asked to push out. And as you know, a lot of people, they believe a lot of what they read instead of taking what someone gives you at face value, whether you read it, whether they speak it to you, whether you hear it on the television. Instead of taking that at face value and then going to do your own research, there's a lot of people out there that take whatever they hear or see or read as gospel without grabbing a different opinion. That's why I always tell folks, regardless of your political leanings, take the information you have, find a couple other sources. The Computer Price Index is a perfect example. I went to CNN and NBC News. Those news organizations are to the left. I went to Newsmax, which is to the right, and I went to Fox, which is kind of barely to the right these days. They reported the same headline differently. The CNN and NBC reported the CPI, at 7.1, as inflation is cooling. Inflation is slowing down because remember last month in October, it was 7.7%. So inflation is still rising, but it's not rising as fast. Jump over to Newsmax, and the way they portray it is 7.1% increase. Granted, it's less than the 7.7, but it is still way too high, and then they give a bunch of reasons. So again, it depends on where you get your information. But I always tell people, get your information from multiple sources and then make your own decision. Talk a little bit about the collapse of FTX. I am not a financial advisor. I had a few dollars in Shiba and Doge coins and made a few dollars, as well as I have a helium miner. All the crypto is basically, gone to the crapper. So if you had a lot of money in crypto, you no longer have a lot of money in crypto. But the FTX collapse, apparently this company at one time, at least on paper, was worth $32 billion. That's with the B, $32 billion. And this knucklehead, he's like 4 years old with really bad hair, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was just placed under arrest in the Bahamas, and he's waiting extradition back to the United States. The federal court of Southern New York has filed several charges against him, wire fraud, misleading investors, that sort of thing. A lot of folks are comparing this type of fraud to Enron and the Bernie Madoff scandal. If you remember Enron several years ago, was it Ken something or other? They defrauded millions of people out of billions of dollars. There were a lot of folks that were retirement age, that were retired, or that were preparing to retire, never got back a dime of their money. There was no money to get back. And these folks were basically left destitute. And a very, very, very bad situation. And then the Bernie Madoff scandal, his firm, the Bernie Madoff firm, same type of situation. These guys all go to prison, and the people don't get their money. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. I didn't have any money in FTX, whatever the heck that is. So it's not affecting me personally, and I'm not familiar with anybody that it is affecting. Talk very, very briefly about Russia and Ukraine. So winter has set in over in Russia and Ukraine, and there's not going to be a lot happening. Now, early last week, the Ukrainian army actually launched missile strikes deep into Russia and took out a couple airfields and a couple other targets, which is pretty significant. I also read where the United States gave the Ukraine the go-ahead to launch these strikes into Russia. I said that. The United States told Ukraine, yes, it's okay to bomb Russia. That doesn't sit very well with me. If you told Ukraine that, don't tell everybody else. Kind of keep it a secret, kind of an encrypted email or something like that, given like some secret code. That's very dangerous. Now, we know that the United States is shipping all sorts of missiles and guns and ammunition and all sorts of, advanced warning radar over it. We get that. And we probably have a couple advisors, a couple guys with tech, manuals over there, how to set things up. They're unarmed and that sort of thing, unarmed combatants or whatever you want to call them. But you cannot say that out loud. You can't tell Ukraine, oh, yeah, go ahead and bomb Russia. It's okay with us. The United States is also providing the Ukrainian army real-time satellite data of where particular units, tanks, and airplanes are on the ground. So the United States will use its satellites and say, hey, Ukrainian guy, there is a T-80 tank sitting at these coordinates, this latitude and longitude. It hasn't moved in a while. There's a bunch of soldiers running around. I bet if you drop one of those really expensive missiles that we sent you, you might kill a bunch of people. Then like 30 seconds later, boom, the tank's gone. That doesn't sit very well with me. I know I talked about we're fighting a proxy war just by the mere fact that we're providing a lot of munitions to Ukraine. But when we're giving them real-time advice and real-time strategic information, I think that escalates things a little bit, but that's just me. Okay, we got to talk about China. So China is easing some of the restrictions, some of the lockdowns that they had over the past several weeks with this zero COVID policy. So there's a lot more people out on the street. Hopefully they're taking all the bars and everything that they welded onto these high-rise entrances, and people are allowed to come out of their homes now. And I think China did that, succumbing to a lot of international pressure. But I have another theory I'll talk about here in a second. Since COVID came out, China has not had a vaccine to distribute to their folks, to their population. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe it's just too big of a task, the 17 bajillion people that live in China. But check out what I read today. So 2 years after the first few countries approved of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine for domestic use. So BioNTech is a German biotechnical company. They worked hand in hand with Pfizer. So everybody knows Pfizer. It's kind of a household name, Pfizer, Moderna, Eli Lilly, that kind of thing. But a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people have not heard of BioNTech in Germany. So they kind of shrunk it a little bit. It sounds a lot better to say Pfizer instead of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID. It just doesn't roll off the tongue as well as Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, Johnson & Johnson, that sort of thing. So 2 years, those vaccines been around for 2 years. So China will finally allow this mRNA vaccine to be distributed domestically. Oh my goodness, thank you. China, you're finally getting on board and you're going to distribute the Pfizer vaccine to the public. Oh, wait a second. I'm sorry. Second paragraph. On Friday, China confirmed in a press briefing that it would let German nationals receive the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine, which uses RNA technology, in exchange for German health authorities on Wednesday approving the China's Sinovac vaccine for Chinese nationals living in Germany. Oh, wait a second. So China says, okay, we'll take the Pfizer vaccine and we'll give it to the Germans that are living in China if you will let us vaccinate the Chinese living in Germany with this Sinovac vaccine, Sinovac. I have never heard of that vaccine before. Again, I'm not some, biotechnical guy that knows the in and outs, but that just seems kind of weird. We'll allow you to vaccinate your people in our country if you allow us to give our people in your country, this version of the vaccine. If the vaccines are effective, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, why doesn't China just say, hey, all you Chinese nationals in Germany, head to these places and get your shot and just be done with it? That's really weird. That doesn't make any sense to me. So Fosun Pharmaceuticals, which is BioNTech's distribution partner for China, secured 100 million doses for the Chinese market in December of 2020. Yet their applications to use its doses in mainland China is still pending, with no indication of when the mRNA vaccine will be approved for widespread use. This is really weird. So I'll adjust my tin hat for a moment. They're letting more people out. They're easing the restrictions. COVID cases are going to go absolutely through the roof. The vaccine to use on their citizens is stuck in some bureaucratic red tape nightmare for 2 years. Somebody told me the other day, what's the difference between the truth and a conspiracy theory? And the answer is 3 months. So I got kind of a kick out of that. So we have all these people that are gonna get COVID, and we know that COVID-19 came from China, and now these people are going to start interacting with other people. These people are going to get on planes, they're going to get on boats, and now we have the potential of another variant spreading around the world. It just, stuff like this just doesn't sit well with me. I don't know. Call me crazy. I'll take off my tinfoil conspiracy theory hat. But with China, their economy is one of the largest, strongest economies in the world. You would think that they would shell out a few dollars. And I think the Pfizer BioNTech, it was like $14.95 or $15 a dose. Maybe they can use their little CVS, coupon card or something and get a discount. I don't know, but that's pretty expensive. And you give $15 a dose injection to the 17 bajillion people you have in your country, and that's going to run up quite a tab. Now, of course, the slave labor and stuff like that, those folks aren't going to get it. They're going to have to fend for themselves. But of course, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they'll get theirs, and all their little lackeys will get them. And maybe some of this will filter down to the folks on the street. However, speaking of medication and not feeling well, like I said, I do have a sinus infection, self-diagnosed, by the way. Bill Gates and I went to the same medical school, so I'm telling myself that I have a sinus infection that will turn into an upper respiratory infection. A lot of people don't realize that China and India they export to us. We import from them the vast majority of raw materials, the ingredients for antibiotics, basically for almost all medication. So we rely on a foreign country that let COVID loose accidentally on purpose. That's not me to say. They're responsible for COVID. So we're allowing this country to basically provide us the medications that we take on a daily basis, from Tylenol, acetaminophen, aspirin, all that stuff, Motrin, your antibiotics, your Z-Paks, amoxicillin, everything. A vast majority of stuff comes from China. That's kind of a deal with the devil that, again, I talked about it a few minutes ago. That kind of makes me uneasy that we're relying on a country that has total disdain for the United States. We're relying on them to keep us healthy to an extent. So China is the top pharmaceutical importer in the United States in 2021. It didn't change in 2022. 100 billion is a total dollar amount. India is second with 28.7 billion, not even close. Mexico, 14.9, kind of edging up there to India, and they ranked third for imports. Why do we get it from China? Because it's less expensive. Why are Nike tennis shoes made in China? Because they cost about 50 cents a piece, and Nike's going to charge $100. Why is a certain medication put together, raw material, and maybe it's put together here? We take the raw materials and then, we stick it in the capsule or the tablet. Why do we get that material from a foreign country and distribute it here? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because that pill of amoxicillin costs 1/1,000,000th of a penny to produce, but the insurance company is going to be charged $10. Now, with your insurance, your copay, you may pay $5, $10, whatever. But rest assured, you pay the $10 copay, your insurance company is paying a lot more for that one antibiotic or whatever type of medication we're talking about. I went into the CVS yesterday, left work, went to CVS, walked into my local CVS, looking at the sign. So I went to the cold and flu section. It looked like a pack of wild dogs had just torn apart the cold and flu section. I walked in, I'm like, what is this, like buy one, get 10 free for Dayquil and, cold and flu medication? It was insane. I got down on my hands and knees and crawled around, and on the bottom shelf, like back in the corner, knocked over on its side, was the last container of like Dayquil, NyQuil, the little combo pack. They didn't have the CVS version. That was probably, 1/3 the price. So I had to buy that. And I asked the lady next to me, I'm like, what happened? And she's like, the flu's going around and everybody's just a little paranoid, not quite as paranoid as, buying all the toilet paper like we did a couple years ago, but people are stockpiling Robitussin, Tamiflu. I mean, the Tamiflu, that's not over the counter, that's prescription. That's also in short supply. And so are antibiotics. So I was like, okay, I guess. And so I took my little, I kind of clutched my little Dayquil, NyQuil like really close. I didn't know if I was going to get jumped when I went by the gift card aisle or something like that. I mean, it's like, geez, let me put this in a bag and wrap it up because I'm not sure what's going to happen. But just really, really, really weird. But the flu is going around. There's a lot of people at work that are not feeling well. Speaking of the flu, where did the flu go in 2020, where did the flu go? 2020 and 2021. So COVID for the most part has subsided. We don't really talk about COVID that much, but now the flu's back. That's weird. Why wasn't there any flu cases in 2020? The flu season, October, November, December, January. Why weren't there any flu cases? I'm going to have to look that up. I'm going to have to go to the CDC or the WHO and look up the number of reported flu cases in 2020 and 2021. Damn, that's really weird. As I say, with just a slight bit of sarcasm. The Instant Pot that I spoke about, that I got the wrong one. I got the right one. I got the Instant Pot that you can use for canning. It gets up to 15 PSI. The other Instant Pots only get to 12 PSI. I went ahead and kept the old one, and I'm going to go ahead and use it. And what did I make? Saturday, I made some chili. Went on YouTube, some little YouTube lady, I forget, Six Sisters Stuff is her YouTube channel. I think there's like 6 sisters, and they bounce back and forth. So I used one of her chili recipes. Turned out very, very well. I actually made some pickles, just some like refrigerator pickles. Yeah, the pickling powder, the vinegar, got that ratio, sanitized my mason jars in the Instant Pot, set them aside, pack the pickles down there and then put them in the fridge. And I think they'll be ready tomorrow. Shake them up a little bit and I'll see how my refrigerator pickles turned out. Last thing I'll talk about. There is a young man who is located here in Central Virginia. I'm not going to give out his website, but he is a private meteorologist. He does like long range forecasting. He's not like the, your local, NBC, CBS weather folks. So he does short and long-term forecasts. He does seasonal outlooks. He does snow removal forecasts, if you can believe that. So this guy knows a lot of stuff. The Mid-Atlantic is what he calls West Virginia, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. He does, and he divides them into zones. He does a fantastic job. He goes into so much detail that it really makes you feel dumb when you're trying to follow him along. But he does break it down into fairly simple terms that, I don't know, maybe half of us can understand. That the cool thing about it is this guy has no shame. He's not in direct competition with your commercial weathermen, that sort of thing. Those folks are beholden to their station, to their sponsors, and all that sort of thing. They have to give their forecast, in little 2-minute blips. If it's going to snow, they're going to hedge their bets. They don't want to cause any panic. Well, this young man, he takes no prisoners. He'll tell you exactly what it's going to be. He'll tell you, no, those knuckleheads over at Channel 8, for instance, are way off because of this. And he explains why. These guys go back and forth calling each other names on social media. It's kind of funny, but anyway, this young man that I'm talking about, he is right more often than he is wrong. And when he is right, he is right. He can get the snow forecast, the rain forecast, he can get it down to the 10th of an inch in any particular area that he's providing the forecast for. Why I bring this up, near Christmas, he is predicting here in the Mid-Atlantic, I'll just take Virginia, an Arctic blast, a cold snap, whatever you want to call it, that the temperatures that we're going to see in Central Virginia have not been seen in decades. Now, I don't have a number yet. He hasn't said it's going to be 32 below zero, bring the cats and the dogs in, but he's predicting that it is going to be significant. Another reason I bring this up, I am going to prepare my home as if this is going to happen for a couple of reasons. One, if it doesn't happen, that's a great dry run, and my house is winterized more than it is right now. And then two, if it really does happen, I'm curious to see if my weatherization techniques did any good. So we're going to see how that develops. And I'll let you know as the forecast comes closer. I think it's December 22nd, 23rd. I don't think we're calling for snow. I think it's just these super, super frigid temperatures. So I'll keep you guys up to date on what I'm going to do. And I think this is really good practice. If you have the ability of getting a forecast, like with hurricanes, we know 6, 8, 10, 12 days out, the approximate path of the hurricane and where it might make landfall. So you have the ability of making those preparations. He has the ability of doing this with the weather. You go to your local weather channel, you're not going to see a forecast out more than maybe 7 to 10 days is as far as they go out. And again, they're very basic. We have a cold front here. We have a warm front here. We have these two going here. We have this thing flying down from Canada. We got the jet stream, and that's about as far as the commercial folks get. And for good reason. They're not there to get everybody lost in the details. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because I have a heat pump. And if you have a heat pump, if folks know what a heat pump is, if it gets below, and I don't know the exact, if it gets below like 30 degrees Fahrenheit, your heat pump is not going to do much for you. And again, in the summertime, if it gets above like 90, for instance, your heat pump is not going to be able to cool your house like it would if it was much cooler. So when it gets down to these perhaps single digits or close to single digits, my heat pump is going to run like crazy. And it's not going to be, if I want it to be 72 in the house, my heat pump's not going to be able to do it for me. Same thing in the summer. If it's 99 degrees and I want it to be 72 in the house, my heat pump's going to run all day and it's going to just be crying saying, I can't get you to 72. I'll get you to 78 or 80, but that's the best that we're going to do. So next week, I'll talk a little more about what I plan to do just kind of as a dry run to see if this whole thing works out. So I will keep you up to date on that. And again, I'm on the Twitter, Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. And then it's prep_podcast is the tag name. I don't know, whatever. I think you could probably search it both ways, and you can go ahead and find me on the Twitter. Okay, folks, thank you so much for listening in. Hopefully I'll feel better next time we do this, and I won't be sounding whatever I sound like. So again, be safe, take care of one another, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, help spread the word by leaving a rating and review.